This radio was made in 1924 and was purchased by my father sometime in the 1930s, I believe when he was in high school, and he said he got it at a junk shop for the price of 25 cents. It's 2024 now, and it's time to get the old radio working for its 100th birthday. The NR-12 is a tuned radio frequency, or TRF receiver. It's from before there were superheterodynes and before there was automatic gain control. And the vacuum tubes were very primitive, low gain, and prone to oscillations. Radios of the day squealed and howled and were very difficult to tune. This Neutrodyne radio was patented in 1923 and uses a small value capacitor, providing a little negative feedback to the first amplifier to remove the squeals. I found an old schematic for the NR-12 online, but it was difficult to read, so I drew this new one. The radio is very simple. There is an antenna tuning adjustment of L1 and CV1, and one radio amplifier tuning with L2 and CV2. The radio is not very selective and is prone to hearing multiple stations at once and other interference. Tube U2 is the detector or AM demodulator. There are two audio amplifiers with tubes U3 and U4. You can select medium or loud outputs depending on where you plug in the speaker, but neither is really very loud. This radio was made to run from batteries. After all, it is from a time when only a few homes would have had electricity. This picture shows what the back of the radio should look like with a printed card showing the battery connections. Unfortunately, this card is missing from my radio, but I was able to find this picture online. I didn't have the necessary 45-volt batteries, so the first order of business was to design and build a power supply. My friend Doug designed the regulators for the power supply using LM317s and discrete pre-regulators that provided some current limiting. I was able to find a transformer on AliExpress that was good for the high voltage, but it was going to need a new filament winding. Fortunately, toroidal transformers are pretty easy to add turns to, and I was able to come up with the 8.5 volts needed for the filaments. Of course, I made a circuit board and was able to prototype the whole thing and do some bench testing using resistor loads. The first version of that power supply didn't work too well, so I ended up with a V2 based on two LM317 regulators, and I also put it into a metal box because I found that the magnetic field from the transformer interfered with the radio. The NR-12 needs a high impedance horn speaker. I didn't have one of those. You can't buy them anymore, so I had this little isolation transformer with an audio amp and an old speaker I had. It worked okay. Okay, I gotta clean that. Uh, 30 milliamps on B+, and about 600 milliamps on filaments. Antenna. Transmitter is the Rigel function generator being modulated with my Bing Crosby song. Okay, this is the tube which was not glowing when it was in its socket. Now it's glowing nicely on the bench. 242 milliamps. This is the grid voltage. I've got 90 volts on the plate and just about 4 milliamps. So I'll go to that's minus 1 volt, 3.3, 2 volts, 2.1, 3 volts, 2.16. Try to get out of the Here's the back of the radio. U1 is the audio RF amplifier. U2 is the detector. U3 is first audio. U4 is the second audio amplifier. And then you see the two transformers, T1 and T2, and the two RF tuning coils, L1 and L2. And you can also see the broken Bakelite. We'll see that a little bit more later. And there's the neutralizing capacitor, CN2. Here are the back panel terminal connections. But it's open circuit from here to here and from here to here. So both the primary and the secondary seem to be open internally. The variable capacitors were in pretty bad shape, and I had to take the front of the radio off to get to them. They didn't turn very easily because there was just solidified grease in the bearings, and then sometimes the alignment of the plates were not very good. I added some shims and washers to get the plates to fit together properly. Most of the capacitors tested good except for this one, C2, and I was able to put a little ceramic capacitor in parallel with it. The capacitor on the right there is C5. Its value tested correct, but when I hooked it up to B+, it was drawing about 5 or 6 milliamps through the capacitor, so that wasn't good. I thought for quite a while about how I could maybe take it apart because it looked so cool. I thought I'd put a modern capacitor inside, but in the end, I was not able to get any, disassemble the capacitor. So I put two modern capacitors across the old one and just unsoldered one of the legs of the capacitor. We had this piece of Bakelite on the back panel as a terminal strip, and I couldn't find any material that was similar to it, so I found these sheets which are Bakelite phenolic, 3 millimeters thick, and I laminated them with epoxy and then cut them down on the table saw and jointer, and it worked pretty well. I tried another speaker, an amplifier, thinking I'd get better sound, but honestly it didn't work out that well. The trumpet was just as good. You don't want much bass response because the cabinet is highly microphonic and low frequencies tend to make an oscillation that is very audible. It turns out my house is a very poor location for using this radio. We're in a canyon and there are high tension power lines over the backyard, and the solar power inverter all make noise. I was never able to find a good location here, although I tried a few. Antenna that goes up to that tree, down to here, and then a ground wire that goes over to the electrical box. And this is our KSCO radio station. But damn it, that noise. NR-12 receiver for a test. I've turned it on. It's running from its power supply, and I have my amplified speakers plugged in. And so we had found some stations around here. There's one. So you kind of tune a little on both.
In the 1960s, he died at age 32 of a heart attack in 1973 because he was only taking magnesium. What a terrible, terrible loss. He was such a wonderful man.
So here's our first station.
He's getting a lot of misinformation because he's asking doctors, what do we need? So, just eat like everything you need. And he believes.
And we'll go up to the next one.
Well, Doctor, I'm grateful for your time. You do have a website too, right? People should check that out.
That's got you by the guts. And I think that's going to be the game-changing question, hopefully, is that they only made 300.
We don't know where that hum is coming from, but it sounds like interference from the AC power.
It's pretty much being considered a collector's item at this point, and I think it will maintain its
station number 2.
Because obviously cars of this caliber are depreciated most of the time. Is it a P1?
Is that the same station or a different station?
That's $1 million car, man. I wish.
Okay,
but,
said out there at P1, McLarens are losing 36 their depreciation.
O sea, no es que imagínense que tú pensarías, bueno, pues yo estaría mezclada.
The Spanish station.
No, eso no funciona así. Porque cuando
media spaces, really do it for everybody being open-minded and for trusting myself to make this the best show possible and hopefully even
Whoa.
be like what you've been used to, but it's going to be really, really good. And I think we're really, really excited for all of it there. But yeah, what I like to bet on, speaking of Jen, I love to bet on awards. That's what
this is KGO.
I am a big awards bettor. Oftentimes, biggest sale of the year, save 50% on the Sleep Number limited edition smart bed, plus free home delivery on select smart beds when you add any
45 and 50.
Find a store near you. Visit
KCBS. A Spanish station. Music. Another unknown station. It's kind of a weak station.
that's about it.